Movie posters caused Steve McQueen to have outbursts. He tallied each conversational line. He even had his screen time measured by attorneys. Why? Because he detested having to share the limelight with a certain Hollywood icon. The staff had to keep them separate because of how terrible their hatred had gotten. In between takes, fans believed them to be pals, but the reality was far more sinister. Finally, after 40 years, we know who McQueen detested. And it's the most unexpected person. Steve McQueen was born in Beech Grove, Indiana, on March 24, 1930. But his life had been painful from the beginning. Only a few months after meeting his mother, his stunt pilot father left. What about his mother? She was unstable, young, and a heavy drinker. Steve had already been abandoned and taken to live with his grandparents in Missouri by the time he was 3 years old. Money was scarce, and the nation was in the midst of the Great Depression. They soon relocated once more, this time to his great-uncle Claude's property. Ironically, that farm ended up being the only location where Steve felt secure and taken care of during such a trying period in America. Claude got him a red tricycle for his 4th birthday. Even though it was a straightforward present, Steve was moved by it. That trike marked the start of his lifelong passion for racing, and he grew fixated on speed. In addition to being a kind man, Claude ended up becoming the father figure Steve never had. Claude gave Steve, who has become my son, a gold pocket watch with an inscription before he left the farm when he was 8 years old. McQueen kept the watch for the remainder of his life. He carried it about as evidence that someone had once genuinely loved him, even when he rose to fame as a movie star. However, things changed when Steve returned to Indianapolis to live with his mother. He was 8 years old. Unable to read effectively owing to dyslexia and having trouble hearing because of an ear infection. Because of his aggressive stepfather, his house was a fearful place. Steve began to get into difficulty and fled many times. He was already living on the streets at the age of 9, where he was a member of a group that stole to make ends meet. Until she eventually relocated him to Los Angeles, his mother repeatedly sent him away and brought him back, living with a new stepfather. Even more harsh is this one. When Steve was caught stealing hubcaps, it was the worst. He was so severely beaten by his stepfather that he was thrown down a set of steps. Steve didn't weep. "I'll murder you if you touch me again with your stench," he muttered icily as he glanced up. Steve ceased being terrified at that point. Things changed at the age of 14. His mother was persuaded to proclaim him incorrigible by his stepfather. He was ordered by a judge to a reform institution for troublesome youths in California called the Youth's Republic. It was difficult. 5 times Steve was placed in solitary. He broke the rules and didn't belong, but he couldn't get the location out of his head. When he interfered with their privileges, the other lads beat him up. He began to acquire discipline gradually. "Nothing without labor" was the school's slogan, and Steve started to grasp structure for the first time. Even after he became famous years later, he never forgot the support he received from Boys Republic. He established scholarships, made financial donations, and frequently returned to speak with children who were similar to him. Steve left Boys Republic when he was 16 and went to live with his mother in New York. But he became restless rather than calm. He boarded a ship bound for the Dominican Republic after meeting 2 merchant marines. He performed various jobs, including one at a brothel. After jumping ship, he was gone in a flash. He wandered the United States, working wherever they needed him to, and sleeping wherever he could. He worked on oil rigs, chopped lumber in Canada, sold pens at carnivals, and even ended up in jail after being jailed for vagrancy. He was on a chain gang for 30 days. Though it also gave him the quiet firmness that would eventually characterize his on-screen demeanor, that experience further hardened him. Steve made a choice that will alter everything in 1947. He obtained his mother's signature to enlist in the Marines at the age of 17. His system was taken aback. Despite the harsh conditions at Parris Island boot camp, Steve survived. He served in an armored regiment and gained tank operating abilities, which he later used to execute his own stunts in Hollywood. Although he was naturally talented as a mechanic, his negative attitude put him in problems. He received 7 demotions. After going missing for 2 weeks to spend time with his girlfriend, he was apprehended and sent to military prison. However, something clicked. Steve became aware that he was ruining his own future while he sat in that jail. He began to change once he was outside. A military training exercise close to the Arctic Circle in 1950 was a turning moment in his life. Steve didn't hesitate when he saw the ice fracture beneath his tank. He repeatedly put his life at danger to save the lives of 5 Marines from drowning. He received praise for it, and was put in charge of the President's Yacht's Special Honor Guard. He was more than simply a homeless youngster when he departed the Marines in 1950. He was a guy who had demonstrated his value, gained respect, and faced death. 2 years later, he enrolled in acting school in New York with the little $800 he had left over from his GI Bill. Steve McQueen started a new chapter there while learning with future celebrities like Suzanne Pleshette and James Caan. Unbeknownst to him at the time, Steve McQueen's choice on a low-budget horror movie would follow him for the rest of his life. He declined a 10% profit share in favor of a flat $3,000 compensation to star in The Blob back in 1958. Despite only costing $110,000 to make, the movie brought in $4 million at the box office. He could have taken home around $400,000 if he had accepted the profit agreement. He lost out on a tiny fortune instead, and received a flat check. He obtained a gig that would define his early career the same year. McQueen revised the original plan for Wanted Dead or Alive, which was to make a bounty hunter a hero. Josh Randall, his character, was unique. The program has almost 100 episodes over 3 rough years, and McQueen learned discipline from it. He subsequently claimed that despite having 3 difficult mother-grabbing years, the program made him famous. Riding that initial surge of popularity, McQueen gambled on a brief but impactful Alfred Hitchcock Presents episode. He portrayed a reporter interacting with a guy claiming to be a Martian in human interest story. One of the show's well-known twist endings was this one. What did most folks overlook? Clint Eastwood was uncredited and in the background. The 2 future legends only appeared on the same screen once. A few months later, McQueen returned for Man from the South, another episode. The stakes were high on this one. His character would lose a finger if he was unable to ignite a cigarette lighter 10 times in a row. Neela Adams, McQueen's real-life wife, played the woman caught in the midst, while Peter Lorre played the antagonist. The wager is cancelled at the end of the show, and McQueen idly flicks the lighter once more. It doesn't work. The audience felt the cold as he barely avoided being mutilated. However, McQueen had been slogging through little parts on TV before all of this. He appeared in a variety of shows, including the United States Steel Hour and the Goodyear Television Playhouse. He even co-starred with William Shatner in the legal drama The Defender, which was released immediately following the success of 12 Angry Men. His fire was already visible. It was serene on the outside but fierce on the inside. He gained the basis he needed to support full-length films from these little engagements. He had consecutive appearances on Climax, The Big Story, and The West Point Story. Constructing a larger goal, he became a member of the Magnificent Seven in 1960, marking the beginning of something greater. The lead wasn't him. Yul Brynner was that person. McQueen, however, made sure he was seen. Whenever Brynner talked, McQueen took action. He moved just enough to steal the scene, messed with his pistol belt, and adjusted his cap. "All I have to do is take off my hat and you disappear," Brynner allegedly told him. However, it was irrelevant. The chemistry was effective. With a $2 million budget, the movie made about $10 million at the box office and became a Western classic. McQueen was more than simply a television personality. He was permanently on the big screen. The motorbike leap that made McQueen a legend followed in 1963 with The Great Escape. He portrayed the disobedient American prisoner of war, Captain Hiltz. That leap over the fence with barbed wire, he wasn't the one. It was Eakins, his stunt double Bud Powell. However, McQueen performed the most of the writing, including parts in which he portrayed the German soldiers pursuing him as well as himself. Johnny Carson gave him a quick compliment on The Tonight Show. When McQueen, who was always honest, responded, "It wasn't me." People's affection for him grew. After winning Best Actor at the Moscow International Film Festival, he became an international icon rather than merely an American celebrity. He made an attempt at something else later that year. He and Natalie Wood were teamed in the romance drama Love with the Proper Stranger, which dealt with unintended pregnancy and abortion, heavy subjects for 1963. McQueen performed as a jazz artist, who following a one-night encounter, learns that Wood's character is pregnant. His performance was well received by critics, and he was nominated for his first Golden Globe. Wood was nominated for her third Oscar. She apparently fell deeply in love with McQueen off-camera. The movie made around $6 million at the box office because to the chemistry that was evident on screen. McQueen wanted to show that he was capable of more than just firearms and stunts. This movie enabled him to present that argument. McQueen was at the peak of his abilities by 1965. He portrayed a rookie poker hustler attempting to defeat an experienced pro in The Cincinnati Kid. He maintained a poker look that would later become one of his defining characteristics. The film earned more than $7 million. Nevada Smith, a grim vengeance story, followed. McQueen portrayed a half-Native American, half-white guy who trains to become a murderer after witnessing the death of his parents. In order to become closer to one of the murderers, he even purposefully allowed himself to be detained. Charm and coolness weren't the only factors in Steve McQueen's ascent to Hollywood stardom. It was about unrelenting drive, range, and danger. He gambled with the sand pebbles in 1966, portraying a tired sailor sent to a warship in China in the 1920s. It wasn't your average McQueen part. Audiences paid attention because it was lengthy, emotionally and politically charged, and it made comparisons to the Vietnam War. He almost broke during the filming. He was so exhausted by it that he took a year off from work. However, the sacrifice was worthwhile. McQueen received his lone nomination for Best Actor out of the 8 Oscars the movie received. He went from being an action star to a serious actor at that point. Bullitt followed in 1968. Bullitt reassured everyone that he was still the king of cool, even if the Sandstones demonstrated his acting prowess. Nobody had ever witnessed a vehicle pursuit like the 10 minutes of thundering motors tearing through San Francisco's winding streets. McQueen chased a black Dodge Charger across the city in a dark green Mustang. He drove himself approximately 10% of the time, but it made no difference. The rules were rewritten by the scenario. The danger, the speed, and the vehicles were all genuine. McQueen had to be dragged back after almost hitting a cameraman at one point. However, the outcome was legendary, not using CGI, just guts and sheer strength. McQueen proved he was more than just a renegade the same year. He traded in his dusty jeans for luxury outfits and a $2,250 Patek Philippe watch in the Thomas Crown scandal. He portrayed a wealthy guy who stole banks for fun. It was a chic, sensual movie that revealed a new side of McQueen. No one was being punched by him, or he was playing chess with Faye Dunaway, smashing automobiles and committing heists as if they were works of art. He also had greater authority behind the scenes, serving as an uncredited producer and promoting the distinctive visual aesthetic of the movie. He had envisioned a part that defied stereotypes, and he was perfect at it. McQueen continued to develop in 1969. He portrayed Boone Hagenbeck in The Reivers, a sly Southerner who steals an automobile to take for a thrill. Based on a Faulkner novel, it was a humorous movie with darker undertones. In addition to earning him a Golden Globe nod, it became Rupert Cross the first black actor to receive an Oscar nomination for Best Supporting Actor. Although it wasn't a very spectacular film, it demonstrated McQueen's versatility once more. Le Mans followed. This was meant to be the best racing film ever made. Although it was McQueen's ideal endeavor, it ended up being a nightmare. In 1970, they began filming without a completed screenplay. The budget went haywire. Authors disagreed. The director resigned. During shooting, 2 drivers had serious injuries, and the IRS demanded $2 million in unpaid taxes. To keep the movie going, McQueen had to forgo his pay and earnings, and reviewers detested it when it was eventually made available. It almost destroyed him. McQueen, however, was not down for long. In 1972, he made a triumphant return with The Getaway. Sam Peckinpah was the director of this violent action movie. McQueen also took a huge chance. He pocketed 10% of the revenue instead of his compensation. The wager was successful. The film was a huge success, making more than $36 million. It was more than just a return. It served as a reminder that McQueen was still capable of providing moviegoers with what they wanted. McQueen was the world's most bankable celebrity by 1974. The bargain he secured for the imposing Inferno was unparalleled. He received $1 million up front, plus a cut of the earnings, for a total compensation of almost $12 million. Today, that amounts to $76 million. He didn't just accept the higher salary. In order to equalize their roles, he reworked portions of the script and insisted on having equal screen time with co-star Paul Newman. Ever the perfectionist, McQueen insisted on performing many of his own stunts in the hugely successful movie, but he disappeared after that. Steve McQueen was at the height of his game with the 1974 success of The Towering Inferno. He had every Hollywood door open and was the most paid actor in the world. He did something unexpected though. Rather than riding the success wave, he vanished. McQueen gave up acting entirely for over 4 years. There were no interviews with him. He was not a role player. Neither studios nor scripts mattered to him. Motorcycles were what he was interested in. McQueen traveled in an RV filled with his vintage Indian motorcycles, while the majority of celebrities sought greater renown. To preserve a low profile, he raced under the fictitious name Harvey Mushman while driving across America, distant from the cameras. It wasn't a pastime of his, he meant it. He competed in fierce off-road events such as the Elsinore Grand Prix, the Baja 1000, and the Mint 400. For him, however, this was nothing new. He had previously established himself in the British Touring Car Championship back in 1961. He also came very close to winning the 12 Hours of Sebring in 1970, despite having a fractured foot. He liked racing that much. In 1978, the year he made his film debut in An Enemy of the People, he was inducted into the Off-Road Motorsports Hall of Fame for his devotion. Few people were aware of McQueen's other side, which was away from the track and the cameras. The location that assisted him when he had nothing was special to him. Republic of Boys. When he was a teenager, and his life was going nowhere, he was sent to a reform school. However, there was something about that school that stayed with him. He never forgot that, even when he rose to fame. In fact, Hollywood didn't realize he was sending all of money to Boys Republic when they assumed he was being tough for requesting so many free things, like trousers and razors, in his film contracts. He showed up rather than only giving stuff away. He would come see the pupils, chat, play pool, and share anecdotes. Even a game room at the school bears his name. Additionally, admirers continue to congregate there each year for the Friends of Steve McQueen automobile and motorbike event, which features some of the original cars he owned. Decades after his passing, his influence is still felt, and the 2025 event is scheduled for the end of May. However, McQueen's personal life was collapsing as he was racing and giving back. Ali McGraw, one of the biggest performers of the 1970s, and he had a turbulent marriage. They first crossed paths in 1971 while filming The Getaway. His eyes were like lightning, she remarked. He drew her in right away. She married McQueen in 1973 after divorcing producer Robert Evans. Everything appeared to be ideal at first. The fissures soon became visible. McQueen brought a great deal of anguish into the relationship since she had no loving parents and had grown up without either. Just as her career was taking off after Love Story, he forced her to leave acting because he didn't want her working any longer. Despite his jealousy, dominance, and frequent infidelity, he insisted on her allegiance. In addition to it, he battled paranoia and drug usage. The loss of their child was the last straw for McGraw. He hardly responded to her sadness. After everything they had gone through, she was broken by that type of indifference. They split up in 1977 and got divorced the following year. However, McGraw never remarried despite the emotional devastation. Despite all of the suffering he inflicted, She referred to McQueen as the love of her life. Steve McQueen returned to the public eye after a 4-year hiatus, but not in the manner anybody had anticipated. He played a scientist named Thomas Stockman in the play-based movie An Enemy of the People in 1976, shocking Hollywood by playing a serious part. This wasn't the usual McQueen that people were familiar with, full of action. This time he was practicing hard and delving into complex discussion, even contributing to the set's construction. He was not interested in being viewed as another action star. As a legitimate performer, he desired respect. To get ready, he read Gogol, Strindberg, and Chekhov's plays. However, the film failed in spite of all the effort and a $3 million budget. It was seldom advertised by the studio. McQueen didn't regret it though. It was intimate. It demonstrated that he was capable of becoming more than just the king of cool. However, by 1979, the situation had deteriorated. Despite his deteriorating health, McQueen persevered through his final 2 films, The Hunter and Tom Horn. His cough worsened during the Chicago filming of The Hunter. He had trouble breathing. He had to let stuntmen to take over the action sequences for the first time in his career. For someone who had always taken the risk himself, that was a devastating change. But he refused to give up. He wanted the movie to be finished. A lengthy and illustrious career came to a close in August 1980 with the release of The Hunter, 3 months before his death. However, the actual battle had begun in 1978 when he started to cough uncontrollably. Nothing helped, even after trying antibiotics and stopping smoking. Then in December 1979, the heartbreaking diagnosis arrived. The mesothelioma is plural. Doctors informed him there was no treatment for the uncommon and fatal asbestos-caused cancer. The disease had spread throughout his body by the beginning of 1980. The National Enquirer revealed the news in March, calling it terminal, despite McQueen's best efforts to keep it under wraps. He sought alternative therapy in Mexico out of desperation. He spent $40,000 a month, more than $150,000 today, for coffee enemas, injections and the contentious medication Littrell. William Donald Kelly, the guy behind it all, was no longer even a licensed physician. Despite assurances that McQueen would get better, things grew worse. The tumors inside him started to develop quickly. McQueen found love one final time in the midst of all of this. He wed Barbara Minty, a model who was 24 years his junior, on January 16, 1980. He had wanted to see her after seeing her picture in an advertisement. It was quick yet genuine. She supported him during each excruciating procedure. She preserved his memories even after he passed away. She chronicled their time together in a book. He started advocating for the prohibition of asbestos, the material that most likely caused his disease. However, the most surprising aspect of McQueen's last months wasn't a relationship or even a movie. It was faith. The once invincible rebel turned to religion for solace. He became a Christian and began going to church after being influenced by his pilot and his wife. McQueen talked candidly about his anxieties and his hopes for the future when evangelist Billy Graham paid him a visit. After McQueen claimed to have misplaced his own Bible, he offered him his own. McQueen requested Graham to pray for him just before he left for his final operation in Mexico. Graham finished by saying, "He's ready to go." With a smile, McQueen said, "I'm ready." The date of Steve McQueen's death was November 7, 1980. Mexico's Juarez, a minister from his church in California, led his memorial service. Despite having one of the hippest looks in Hollywood, Steve McQueen was a man who detested being overshadowed. His career encompassed more than simply tough man roles, stunts, and speed. In addition, it was full of power struggles, envy, and never-ending attention-getting. Being good wasn't all that McQueen wanted. Being the best was his goal, and everybody who got in his way, even for a little moment, was targeted. When he starred in The Magnificent Seven, the turmoil began early. He was invited on board by Yul Brynner, who believed McQueen's edge would enhance the movie. McQueen was little known at the time. Brynner, the Oscar winner, was the star. However, McQueen began stealing scenes rather than expressing gratitude. He made sure that people continued to stare at him because he had few lines. McQueen would tilt his cap, rattle bullets, or slightly alter his weight to catch the camera's attention as Brenner spoke solemn statements. Even worse, McQueen started kicking it away in between shots as Brenner stood on a little mud mound to appear taller. Brenner went berserk over it. He even seized McQueen on the set at one point and told him to take it off. Other performers, such James Coburn and Charles Bronson, began to conduct pranks to get attention as a result of the stress. Despite the chaos on the set, all of that energy was incorporated into the film, and it was successful. McQueen thanked Brenner over the phone when he was dying years later. He acknowledged that the post was crucial to his career, and that Brenner might have easily sacked him. "I'm the king," stated Brenner simply, "and the rebel prince is you." It was one of the rare times they were at peace with one another. Then the soaring fire broke out, and Paul Newman was the opponent this time. With his legendary performances and impressive acting skills, Newman had already been a huge celebrity for more than 10 years. Conversely, McQueen was all about physicality and sheer coolness. McQueen had missed out on a part in Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid years prior, mostly because Newman had landed the lead. He will always remember how painful that was. McQueen created a list of requests when the two were cast in the towering Inferno. He desired the same amount of screen time and the same number of lines as Newman. He also insisted on keeping his name above Newman's on the movie poster. Ingenious. The studio positioned the names such that McQueen's was higher on the right and Newman's was higher on the left. Even though it appeared to be equal, McQueen wasn't content. Despite the fact that it didn't make sense in the plot, he made his character utter the movie's last line. In any case, the authors handed it to him. Infuriated, Newman once referred to McQueen as chicken shit for giving a damn about such trivial matters. Despite the fact that the film made over $200 million, the two never collaborated again. Biographers concurred with Newman that McQueen's fixation on outdoing others stemmed from a profound sense of insecurity. Additionally, McQueen and James Garner, his co-star in The Great Escape, did not get along. Garner didn't mind expressing his opinion that McQueen was more showy than talented. In his early years, he even accused McQueen of stealing his style. McQueen, whose reputation was very important to him, was not pleased. Although the two were courteous in public, their love remained unbroken behind closed doors.